All right, we're ready to go. I'm Mike Ferrante with Century 21 HomeStar on the 21 Mike team, and I have Tony Geraci on the call today. He is broker owner along with Brendan here at HomeStar, and Tony graciously sponsors this half-hour training every Tuesday, 45 weeks out of the year. Just check the schedule or look for Tony's messages or our Facebook posts if you want to know when these classes are going to be. Welcome, Tony. Thanks for joining us again today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited about the topic of because buyer presentations, buyer agencies are very important to our business. And every day, at least once a day, I'm talking to an agent and coaching them on how to get this done. And I'm very interested to see your take on how to do these and what you feel get these done. So yeah. Thanks for the invite again.
Yep. It's a struggle. I know it's a question I get all the time too, and that is indeed the topic. The buyer's agency agreement, why to use it, and how to get the client to sign it without it being extremely awkward. By the way, if you missed the class, you guys can go to the YouTube channel, and Tony also posts the classes. We usually get them up either the same night or the next day. You can just go to our 21 Mike team YouTube channel and catch up on the videos if you want to catch up. As mentioned last week, we talked about the buyer consultation, and that's where you really get down and dirty and understand how to get to know your client better, understand their needs. And what that does is it builds loyalty. And in today's age of internet and being able to click a button and get information on a house, one of the things that we don't have like we used to in the business, Tony, is loyalty. It used to be you had an agent, and when you wanted to buy or sell your house, you called your agent. Now people are going online first, and they're clicking, and they oftentimes have no allegiance to any particular agent. And I think that's a real struggle for agents in our business. You agree on that?
Oh, definitely. Yes. It's the loyalty behind it. And just like you said, over the years, it was kind of easy technology-wise, or the lack of technology-wise, to keep people with you. Now you really have to figure out a way through buyer's agreements is one of the ways of really keeping people with you, as long as they want to be with you, of course, but also just both of you agreeing that this is a relationship you want to stay in, and for until they find or sell, find a house.
Exactly. So segueing here into the buyer agreement and why it's important, it's good to build loyalty and have a client who you are loyal to them, of course. That's one of our code of ethics, is we have to work in our client's best interests, and hopefully they take that loyalty, but it's not always the case. And that's when we introduce a written agreement, which is the buyer agency agreement. Now, some people might say, well, gosh, I don't want to have to put it in writing. And you have to remember that, like any agreement, it's only as good as your willingness to pursue it. So what I mean by that is, we do this buyer agreement where I'm working with Tony, you're my buyer, and I say, hey, we're working together. Let's sign this agreement where we're basically promising to work together. And oh, by the way, even if you buy a for sale by owner house, I'm due a commission because you've engaged me as your realtor during this time. And I know a lot of people say, oh, well, that's very awkward. It's hard to make a buyer understand that. We're going to go into that. But the key on this, and it's like most things in our business, you're either going to use it or you're not going to use it. When do we get in trouble, Tony? It's when we start treating people differently.
Correct.
So if I decide, oh, well, I don't know that Tony's going to be loyal to me, let me get this buyer agreement out. You can't do that. So I wanted to start there and explain, you either use these or you don't. I say use them. I think if you're not using them, you're crazy. But if you start using them, use them with everyone, okay? And I would say practice, the first one you present, practice with someone that is already loyal to you. There should be very little pushback. You'll explain it, and hopefully you get it signed. And each time, it will get easier and easier. So hopefully that makes sense. I wanted to make sure before I bring the agreement up on my screen that I explain why it's so important, okay? This is something, it's not that you're gonna sue someone if they buy a house without you, you may or may not do that, and we don't want to be suing everyone left and right. The idea is that you're taking that commitment, that loyalty, and you're putting it on paper. It's meaningful. Handshake, but even better. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on the why before we get into the what, Tony. But to me, it's firming up that relationship. It's symbolic. When I take a pen and I sign something that says, Tony, I promise to work with you. I understand how hard you're working, and you deserve to be paid for that. When I put my name on that paper, to me, that's meaningful. Anything to add?
Oh, definitely. Yes, I agree with you. It adds to how, I try to explain it, how important that buyer is to you. So kind of going on the other side, say, I'm agreeing to this to you. Not to go, and I'll go more in detail later, but what I like to have agents explain is this, everybody likes to feel special. I don't give this to every one of my buyers. If I have a buyer that doesn't want to commit to me, and I don't take every buyer. So if you're going to be one of my buyers, we both sit down and go over this agreement. You're like a VIP. These are the things I'm going to do for you. I don't take every buyer. I don't, anybody that calls me and says, I want to go see houses right now, I don't take. This is kind of your special for having this, and I will treat you special, and you're a special client of mine. So you got to see what's in for them, and that this is not that you don't take everybody, and that this is a special agreement between the two of you, what you expect out of each other.
Makes a lot of sense. I see Earl typed in the term mutual devotion. I really like that. Mm-hmm. And that reciprocation. You make them feel like they're special because they are. Truly, we can't work with every single buyer that says, hey, show me this house. I'm working with 5 other agents, but hey, Tony, go show me this house. You know what? That's not a way to build a base of good, loyal clients. So I love all. Let me go ahead and jump into the agreement itself now, so that I think everyone should be sold on the importance of it. Let's go through it, understand what's in it, and then at the very end here, we'll go back and forth with a little bit of a script on some ideas how to present. So I'm going to share my screen here. And I'm going to pull up the buyer's agreement. Someone just holler if you don't see it. Otherwise, this is our agreement. A couple of things are pre-populated, but it's really just a 2-page agreement. It's pretty simple language, and essentially you're filling in your buyer's name or names, and then your name. And if you're on a team, your team leader's name should also be in here. So those are the parties involved. Like every agreement in real estate, there needs to be a start date and an end date. It can't be indefinite. Okay, so be 6 months, 12 months, 3 months, whatever it is. Now, I'll just jump in here on this because I know one of the objections that I hear from people is, well, gosh, if I sign this and it doesn't work out, I'm locked into working with you for 6 months, Tony. Well, what if we don't get along? What if I don't want to use you after a month? What if you're dropping the ball and I don't want to be committed to you? What would you say to that, Tony?
Again, this is a mutually agreed upon. If not doing my job and I'm not to your satisfaction, then I'll be happy to release you from that.
And would you put that in writing?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yep. I would say I would just write it on here that, and I would just handwrite on here, if we're not happy working with each other, we can terminate this agreement in writing.
Right, and I explain that you should, if anybody says, well, what would you be unhappy about? Then that's when you start having a conversation. What do you expect of me? Have you bought a house before? Well, when if someone says, well, I have a job that it's this time of day or night, and I only have Tuesdays and Thursdays to see houses, and I want to make sure if something comes up, I get to see it on Tuesday nights. Well, if that's something that's agreeable to you as an agent, then let's put that in there. Within 48 hours notice, if you're telling me that you want to go see a house or 24 hours, I agree to show you that house. Now, this is if they bring it up. Most buyers are just going to go, well, I just want to make sure you show me houses and you look out for my best, just general things. But if they do get down to specifics, that's, in my opinion, that's good. Then you know exactly what you have to keep them as a client, because you never know. Sometimes buyers leave you and you didn't have that conversation of what they were expecting of you. So
setting expectations, it's huge. Absolutely one of the biggest things. Revert back to last week's call about the buyer consultation. One of the keys is that whole question process where you get to know what their expectations are. So I love all that. Next section 2, services to the buyer. Now, we're not going to read this whole document today, but essentially this is exactly what Tony was talking about. This is what I'm going to do for you, what services I'm going to deliver to the buyer. Ask, is there anything else you think you need? And by the way, it does say, it doesn't obligate you to buy a house or make an offer. This is just, I'm going to help you with that search. Just interrupt me here, Tony, if there's anything you want to add, because I do want to make sure we have enough time for the script. And guys, you should really know this agreement, know what it says, so that when the buyer starts asking you questions, you can answer them. Continuous efforts. This basically says that there's not going to be a break in the chain working for you during this time frame. Kind of like you said, Tony, are you going to be available to show me houses during this time? One of the cool things and one of the benefits that I talk about when you're on a team, a couple of the teammates are on here today, is that we cover for each other. A buyer, one fear I hear from buyers, or a complaint I hear actually when we get calls on listings is, we'll say, okay, great, we can show you the house tomorrow. And they say, oh yeah, I tried to call my agent vacation for a week, so I don't know what to do. That's tough. If you're a buyer, you don't really care that your agent's on vacation. You want to see that house. So when you're on a team, one of the benefits I think is that we cover for each other. I can look a buyer in the eye and say, look, even though I may be out of town or tied up with a family event or something, I have other people I can bring in. And whether you're on a team or not, you should have a plan for what happens when you're not available. Okay, next section, compensation. This is the part that gets a little uncomfortable, and this is the part we'll address with some scripts. But this is where you basically say, look, and in exchange for everything I'm going to do for you, we talk about what we get compensated, okay? I see a typo here, but just ignore that if you notice it. But anyway, this is where we talk about how we get paid. This is important because, especially if you're working with lower priced buyers or if a very discount commission is being offered, you want to make sure that when the time comes and you receive that commission check, that it's fair. Excuse me. So we start getting into here what the payment is going to be for our services. And I'm going to skip down to the bottom section here where it talks about it's one of these two things. If it's something that is being purchased off the MLS, it's held by another broker, then we get a fee equal to the commission as outlined in the MLS plus the broker fee, or a minimum of 3%. Now you guys can change this. It's 3-2 graduated commission has become pretty common, but this is whatever you agree. Just remember, treat everyone equally. You can't say it's 3% for some buyers and a 3-2 for others. But this is where basically, regardless of what's being offered in the MLS, if they're only offering 2%, our fee is 3%, and that means that they're going to have to kick in that extra 1%. I'm not sure if I explained that clearly. Tony, do you want to jump in on that, or did I explain that well enough? Meantime, I saw a chat question too. I'm going to look at that.
No, you definitely explained that. It's just you got to be consistent with your pricing and your services. It should always be identical with reason with everybody that you can out there, but you can't have a minimum to leave the house, so to say. So having a minimum is completely acceptable on that. And if you really explain that to clients, I think especially, I feel that there's a lot more self-employed people today. I don't know, it's just over the last 20, 30 years of being in real estate, and more business oriented, and they understand that this is a commission only business. And if you explain to them that your time, you're not requiring them to buy anything, but you do want to put something in writing and having this minimums and having the dollar amounts there to be transparent, that so they know what's happening. And I think more and more business owners, or the buyers are business owners, or business experience enjoy knowing that, or at least feel comfortable that you're being transparent.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned the minimum, because I don't think I mentioned the second number that's on the agreement right here, the 2,000. Okay. And this, again, guys, you can tweak this to whatever works for you. Back in the day when I was working with investors, primarily very low price sales, I was working with a $1,500 minimum. Our agreement currently defaults to 2,000, but this is in those examples where you're selling $20,000 houses to investors in Cleveland or Akron or wherever you might be working. Obviously, 3% of 20,000 is only $600. And before I start going into the math of it, we'll do that when we present the script in how to have this conversation. But there's a minimum percentage and a minimum base fee, whichever is greater. Okay, so that if you're selling really cheap houses, you don't want to end up getting 3% of 10,000 or 20,000. Section is basically the for sale by owner section. If it's not listed with a realtor, I'm still going to have a minimum fee to assist you with the purchase of the for sale by owner. This is a whole additional half-hour class where we talk about how to deal with for sale by owners when either they will or won't offer a commission. But putting this out there up front, again, setting that expectation is important, because you want, first of all, to train your buyers to contact you about for sale by owners, not to go direct them, because we want to be the gatekeepers. We want to help them with that purchase no matter whether it's listed or not. So that's what the second section is. It's about something that's not listed on the MLS, and the fees should be the same. Okay. Now, obviously, you can negotiate these later. If the for sale by owner says, no, I'm not going to pay you 3%, but I'll pay you 2%, you can always go back to your buyer and have this discussion and figure out how to handle it. Okay. Next section, it just, your obligations as a realtor. This is, again, what Tony said, what I'm going to do for you. Like every other document in Section 7, we got to get that fair housing statement out there as much as we can. You guys all know that. And this is just, these other clauses tend to be more legalese type stuff, that this contract is binding between the two of us. There's no side agreements. This talks about potential buyers that could be involved. You could be making an offer with another buyer as well, that we're in the business of helping buyers. They're not our only buyer. This is our checklist to say, yes, they've received the consumer's guide, and that there's going to be an agency disclosure on every offer. And then here's where the buyer acknowledges it. So I went through a lot of those clauses quickly because I want to save time for the script. But if you guys have any questions on this, go ahead and message me or Tony. We can always help you with this. I'm going to type my email address in the chat box. You guys need to hook up with me on this. And now I want to go over the actual script. First, let me check the chat box real quick. I thought somebody had a question. Yeah, so Joanne was asking about the broker fee. That was actually my info. The reason that looks different is that on the team, we do have a different broker fee for some stuff that we do. Rather not spend too much time on that, Joanne, but if you have questions, you can always contact me separately. But it's something that we do on the team for some stuff that we offer. All right, so let's get into the script of how to present this. So Tony, if you'll be my role play guy here, make sure you're unmuted. Okay, looks like you're unmuted. Okay, so the way I usually start this conversation is we've already built up the expectations. I understand your needs. I'm going to work very hard to find you this. It's a competitive market right now. It's a seller's market, and it's you know, we're getting outbid on houses all the time. We need to get into them immediately. And this is everything I'm going to do for you. Okay, that's all the easy part. The hard part is when you start talking about a minimum commission. Okay, so when I get down to the commission part, I say, and Tony, you understand, of course, that I'm self-employed. I'm a contractor. I don't get a salary or anything. And in order to, you know, provide for my family and earn a living, we get paid commissions. And with properties that are listed on the MLS, they are offering a commission to us. It's typical that it's 3% or a 3.2, and maybe I'll explain to you what a 3.2 means. But in some cases, a full commission is not always offered, and that's why on our buyer agreement here, Tony, we do specify what our minimum commission is. And for us, our minimum that we get paid whenever we sell a house is either 3% or at least $2,000, you know, if we're looking at some lower price properties. And essentially, for example, if they're only offering 1%, let's say, then we ask the buyer to pay the difference in that fee. So in that example, you'd be responsible for the other 2%. Does that make sense? And now you're going to grill me with questions.
Of course, yeah, no, that makes sense. And most buyers might say, well, how often does that come up? Have you seen that happen often? I don't want to get in a situation where I'm paying more. Will I be paying more for a house using you through someone else? Do I get to see a house just as fast with you than I would with any other agents? Those are usually the similar questions, or you know, most oftenly asked.
Yep. So let's hit some of those. They're kind of objections. So let's hit some of those, and we'll, if anyone has other objections we're not bringing up, like fears or objections you think when you present this to your buyers, just type them in the chat box and we'll cover them. So one of the ways I usually handle, you know, here is, so that means I'm paying more for the house. You know, if I got to pay an extra 2% in that case, that means I'm paying more. I say, first of all, it doesn't happen very often. Most of the listings are offering at least a 3%. And I try to make light of it. I say, but Tony, sometimes the sellers are cheapskates and they think that it's better for them to only offer 1%. So in that example, we're, you know, kind of crazy example that almost never happens. If they're only offering 1%, our minimum commission is 3%. And as I explained, you're responsible for the other 2%. What I recommend that we do is that if you were going to offer 100,000, instead let's offer 98. So the seller's still paying that $2,000, but they're just paying it in the form of a lower sale price. Okay, because eventually that's coming out of your pocket either way. So let's make the seller pay for it by just offering a little less. Another way we can handle it is by having the seller pay closing costs. So again, if it's $2,000 in this example, we can make your offer at 100,000 and then build in some seller paid closing costs. So again, the seller's still going to pay that 2,000, but they're just paying it in a different way by contributing to your closing costs, which covers that $2,000 deficiency. And I've never had anyone balk at that. You know, I don't know if anyone has ever tried that approach, but it always works for me. When I explain that paying it in one form or another, they say that makes sense. Do you have anything to add to that, Tony? Or
no, that's perfect. It's just explaining that. You could even show them, you know, what's on the MLS and explain to them that. But you just got to be careful that you don't scare them away that thinking that it's all about money. The main thing is that you're getting into this agreement. It's just because you want to help them buy a house, want to make sure that you're compensated fairly between and can be negotiated there. That's all. That it's not all about the money. It's all about their services and what they're going to get, and make sure they're getting your full attention to helping them buy a house.
Yeah. And not everyone's going to balk at this. I know I wanted to save time to talk about the objections, because this is the fear that a lot of agents have about even starting to present these. So I wanted to really focus on the objections. If you've done a great job on the front end with the buyer consultation, some people are going to be like what you said. Yeah, gosh, that sounds fair. You getting paid 3%, that sounds fair. Where do I sign? Those are the easy ones. The ones that object and say, well, wait a minute, does that mean I'm paying more? This is a way to explain it to them where you can show them that, obviously you have value and that this is what you're working for. And you can even talk about, don't even get the whole 3%, understand that I'm getting, this split and this split and this fee and that fee. And this particularly plays into the minimum commission. So let's talk about the $2,000 minimum. Some investors, for example, balk at this minimum because they're buying low price houses. And if you tell them, okay, the commission on a $20,000 house is $600, that means that the difference between that and the $2,000 is $1,400. So Mr. Investor Tony, that means that in this case, you would have to kick in $1,400 to make my minimum commission of $2,000. I never have trouble with investors, even though people think, oh, they're cheap, they don't want to kick in one more dime. Again, I talk about the $600 and I say, look, I'm going to work very hard for you. Tony, as an investor, I got to look at 10, 20 houses sometimes before you buy one, and understand that if I'm only getting paid $6 for this house, by the time I split with my broker, split with my team, put gas in my car, pay my expenses, I might be taking home $100 after all these expenses. And I mean, you have to agree that doing all this work for $100 isn't really fair, right?
Right, exactly. No, I think that investors, if you explain to them it's a business, just like they're investing in property, it's a business to them, it's just dollars and cents to them, and explain that you're a business person and your time is valuable and you're investing your time to go in there, and you have this minimum, and that they won't get a diminished service because you're going to go out there, and I have some agents that really specify what they're going to do, because I think any investor that's lost out on properties because they didn't get a chance to see it, or their agent didn't go out there and take a look at it, or missed out on opportunities, you could put what you're going to do. If say any property, if you sign this agreement with me, one of my things I'm going to guarantee to you, within 24 hours, 48 hours of any property coming on the market, I guarantee I'll go out there and take a look at it, or show you it if you're in town, or a representative of you, and I'm going to put you as a priority.
And those things you just said answer my next question. What happens when a client says, well, you know what, I've talked to other agents and they don't do this, and then that's when you got to value and how to communicate it. From an earlier class, we talked about that. Know what your value is and how to communicate it. So if they say, well, you know what, so-and-so down the street said they don't care, they'll just work for the $600, again, communicate your value. And at the end of the day, if they're not willing to pay you a minimum commission, my recommendation is you don't work for that client then. You want them to be loyal to you, and if they don't understand your value and they want you to run around and look at 20 houses and net $100 at the end of the day, maybe that's not a client you should be working with. So I know, especially if you're not doing a ton of business, it's hard to walk away from any business, even if it's a $600 commission, but your time is worth more. The time that you spend earning that $100 after 3 months of looking at a bunch of rundown properties, you're better off taking that time and devoting it to clients that do understand your value and are willing to sign the agreement so that you can actually get paid a fair wage. $100 after you spend 30 hours, running around, that's crazy. That's not even minimum wage. Yep.
That's right. I always got to look at that. And then I think any investor that's been doing it for a while knows how hard it is to get some agents to see certain properties. So you got to ask questions like, how long, if this is a new relationship, how long have you been investing in properties? Have you had good experience with others or bad experiences? And also, I think some of the investors are going to be happy dealing with someone that's experienced, that wants to put them as a priority, because again, they might be able to find some agents that'll drop whatever they're doing for $600 commission, but they might not be experienced or brand new or not have any other business. But we all know that if you have your investor that wants to see houses tonight, then it might make you $600, but you have someone else that wants to see a $400,000 house. I think you're going to show the person that has $400,000 house. But if you have a buyer agreement with your investor that says, just like similar to you, Mike, you have a team that look at it. I'm going to make sure you're covered.
Yep.
If I can't show it to you, or if I have other clients that are coming, I will make sure I get someone else. And you got to make sure you can back that up. So again, you're giving service to them and putting it in writing.
Yep. That's good stuff. And I think that's a great way to end this and sum it up. Don't be afraid to present your buyer agreements, guys, and your homework. Go present one buyer agreement this week. I want you to look at your pool of buyers. And if you're going to buy into the program of using buyer agreements, go out and try this one time. Pick your client that you think is most likely to be receptive to it, to get over that fear of presenting it, and go out and get one buyer agreement presented in this week. So do your homework, and let's tune in next week. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Mike. See ya.
Okay, bye.